Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for January 3rd. I'm Chris Manning, that's Brendon Kleen. Cold open question to start the show, Brendon Kleen. Victor Wembanyama recently described Las Vegas as a dystopia. I don't know if you saw these quotes about his first trip to Las Vegas. I'm not going to ask you what city you think is a dystopia, because I frankly think oftentimes a lot of people in our media, in the broader basketball media sphere, are kind of mean to cities for no reason. Every city has its charm. You just got to be willing to be curious. But I'm asking you this. What is your basketball dystopia?
Is this a place?
It's a vibe. It could be a way of play. It could be a team. Like, what is your current basketball dystopia? I wanted to know. We've done so many of these now that they've been a little like direct. I wanted something a little open-ended, a little open to interpretation.
What came to mind immediately is the Detroit Pistons locker room right now.
Yep. I think that's a great answer. It's an utterly great answer. That's a team going
I don't want to
nowhere.
Be there.
And yeah, I think that's a good one. I'll give you a fandom one and a media one. My fandom one would be going back to when Earl Clark was the Cavs like starting small forward. He couldn't inbound the ball for an entire season. That was just like an incredible thing that it was like a bit at some point that guy just could not inbound the basketball. And that's like a basic skill, and he just couldn't do it in late game situations. It was bizarre. That cost him like at least 2 wins that year. The other one is my basketball dystopia would be whatever team is like trying to negotiate with Sam Presti, because we're going to talk about the Thunder on the show, and I was thinking about what it must be like to negotiate with the guy who has all these picks. It's like giving a gift at Christmas for someone that you know has everything or has the money to buy themselves anything already. Like, they already got the nice car, they have a watch, like, they have the suits. They don't really need you to buy them anything, but you want to get them a gift anyway. How do you even, like, negotiate with Sam Presti? To me, if I was, like, an NBA GM having to call Sam Presti, be like, hey, what is the value for Lou Dort if you were to give him up right now? I don't even understand where you would start.
Could probably say the same about Danny Ainge. I think, there's a lot of imbalance in the trade market. I think I didn't throw this at you yet, but I think Thursday's episode needs to be a ranking of all the trade assets in the NBA. Not every single one, but the most available things that could be dealt ahead of this deadline. And I have a feeling a lot of them will be related to Mr. Presti and Mr. Ainge, so I'm fully on board with not wanting to be on the other side of a phone call with those two.
Number 1, Evan Fournier.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. We're off to the races.
All right, we'll get to that on Thursday. Coming up on today's show, we're going to give you some quick reactions to the debuts of OG Anunoby, Immanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett on their new teams. And we're going to talk about tiers in the Power Kings, tiers for the title. Let's dive into it. This is the Just Basketball Show for January 3rd. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. 5 stars only. And subscribe on YouTube as well. And want to tell you about our friends at Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and NFL. Sign up today with our code JUSTBASKETBALL, all one word, all caps, and Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. We're also doing TikTok content in partnership with Thrive that you can check out right now. Our guy Colby and myself, a couple times a week, will be doing new picks over there. And I think we're doing pretty well, if I do say so myself. I think we're holding it down over there for the most part. And word of advice, just most of the time, I just look at Jokic and I say over points, rebounds, assists. That's my guiding light when I'm stuck, if I'm being entirely honest about it. Brendon, let's start with the initial game reactions to OG Anunoby with the Knicks, Immanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett with the Toronto Raptors. Let's start with OG. He played the first game, did foul out, which was very funny because he just like racked up fouls in his first game. But what did you make of OG's debut with the Knicks? What did he add? What stood out to you?
I think it just gives them a real elite NBA version of a player that they've clearly been chasing, right? They trade for Josh Hart at the deadline last year. They drafted RJ Barrett almost 5 years ago now, 4.5 years ago now. They have toyed with this idea of, hey, a wing 3-and-D stopper would be a really good thing next to Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. And now they have one, right? So you saw him immediately just fit into that mold. There were some opportunities for him to do a little bit more on the offensive end. He got to run a little bit of pick and roll. He, had the ball to kind of flow into some sets. All that's great. But what OG Anunoby is going to be for this team is a 3-and-D, high level version of that type of player, something that they've been wanting. 3 of 6 from 3 in this game, but I would say statistically the more interesting thing, this is from Tommy Beer of, I think he has a Substack, he's done some stuff for Forbes, about Anunoby as the primary defender on Anthony Edwards, which is not just in this one game. This also includes Raptors-Wolves matchups, I believe, earlier in the season, but Edwards has been 4 of 14 from the field with 3 turnovers and 0 assists in those games. And what you saw Anunoby do in this game is just stay attached to Ant from start to finish. And there is a lot of value in that when you are like 6'8" and however many hundreds of pounds OG Anunoby is, right? Like, we think of that with like a peak Chris Paul type of defense, that point of attack, slithery, or even a Drew Holiday. But OG Anunoby does that, and he's like a freaking rhinoceros chasing after you instead of like a little, like a meerkat or something. Like, it feels like he could destroy you if he catches up to you. And I would imagine that for any ball handler, that's a pretty terrifying proposition. And you add that into the Knicks defense, which is already very strong and well-structured and executes at a high level, and it's just going to make them better. And I think he's going to fit in very well there, and that is before you even get to the offense and can he do more? Can he take more shots? Where's the usage go? And on and on and on. I think he's just going to be a hand-in-glove fit.
They're going to be a pain in the ass to play against. I mean, I still have some questions about like the ceiling, obviously, and really what OG is on offense. I there's going to be some things he adds, and what this all looks like to me is, still up in the air a little bit as far as the ceiling in the offense goes and what else they do, I guess. But defensively, this is dead on. Like, he's going to take them to a place where they can put so many good physical defenders on the floor and just good fucking luck scoring against them. Good luck navigating OG and Josh Hart and DiVincenzo and finding ways to hunt Jalen Brunson in the playoffs or anything like that. Like, this just levels them up in a way that I really like Quickley. I even listening to some other shows and thinking about Barrett a little bit, I even understand Barrett, I think, like why you could still hold stock on him. OG is just like going to be a perfect Tibbs guy. If you told me, did I have a little shakes when I remembered, Brendan, that has a surgically repaired knee and is going to be playing for Tom Thibodeau? Yes, but I'll worry about that more in a year and a half than I will in the next 6 months while this team is absolutely a pain in the ass. I mean, this to me, this trade, Brendan, this OG addition, does it at least put the Knicks in the conversation of the team below the top 4 that you would not want to play in the first round, just based on sheer annoyance? If you look at the other options, like, is this maybe the team you just don't really want to have to play right out of the gate in the playoffs, just based on OG and based on Brunson and based on just how gritty and tough this team seems to be?
They certainly gave Cleveland and Miami everything that they could handle in the playoffs last year, but
that's being kind to Cleveland, who just got their ass kicked by the Knicks, if we're being honest about it.
Everything they could handle. I think
yeah.
The reason I would say it's not the Knicks is because the Miami Heat still exist. But
I just kind of think they might end up like top 4.
Be a nightmare.
I think the Heat. What if the Heat just end up 4? Like, would you rather say, if you were like picking, if you were the 4 seed and you said, okay, I'm going to get one of the Knicks or the Magic in round 1, who would you pick?
Of course, you'd rather play the Magic, but that's more about youth. I get your point. I think that the Knicks are going to be a complete handful. I think that they are not done in terms of trades and maneuvering. Unless everything here just clicks into place. I mean, the rotation beyond OG, we also saw Precious play center, which I kind of dismissed when you brought it up. I thought, hey, if Nick Nurse and Darko Rajakovic won't do it, why on earth would Tom Thibodeau ever play Precious at center? And he did. So if that works, and Miles McBride, who got a nice little extension out of his teammate being traded, if that all clicks, then maybe this is their rotation, and this is just where they go from here. But I think that there's more, and I think that they, regardless of what ultimate form, their starting lineup at the very least is going to be a pain in the ass to handle, and looks to fit really well too. So I like everything I'm seeing there, and maybe they'll just get into the top 4. You never know. Maybe they're the one that is looking at the 5 seed the other direction and wondering who they're going to have to host in the first round. It easily could go there. That's what happened last year. But what about Quickley, Toronto? You watched your beloved Cleveland Cavaliers
Beloved's a
take
strong
on
word, but
Quickley and RJ Barrett. What did you see?
Quickley is adding some real verve to Toronto off the bat. I mean, there is a natural, I think, synchronicity in how him and Scotty want to play. They both just want to go. They both just want to be active. And there's something really fun about that. Quickley is just so energetic. He is so not the energy Toronto had at its guards before. Like, if you wanted to say like two guys are opposite in a lot of ways, I think him and Schroeder are like really like very different in some ways. Quickley has this like, he's a little bigger obviously, but he also just has this a little bit of verve and like extra juice and desire to get up tempo at times, where Schroeder is a little more traditional. He wants to run some pick and roll. He wants to kind of be a little more methodical. This is just adding, I think, a really nice energy to what Toronto is going to be. The pace he provided, I think, did give Cleveland some fits at times. And Cleveland, right now, not in a great defensive place. Certainly, like just really in a kind of a weird spot overall right now. I think even with some recent wins, but Quickley is going to add some verve, and I think he makes Toronto more watchable. And also, Pascal Siakam just like went off in this game, and maybe just like having another like adult ball handler on the team like helped him out to some degree and enabled him to kind of get comfortable. But I thought Quickley was awesome. Him in Toronto is going to be really fun, especially as he gets time to grow and kind of figure out some stuff and stretch his wings a little bit. I mean, he played like a pretty good amount of minutes. Started his first game, as did RJ. I'm really excited about what Quickley's going to look like here.
Yeah, you mentioned Schroeder. I think they should just play together. I think, personally, I understand RJ money-wise and reputation-wise probably deserves a starting spot, but I think Schroeder does a lot of that for them. I just think there was only one of him. Now there's two. I don't know how you feel. I feel like a lot of what you were saying about Quickley, like they did have a little bit of that. It's just how much of an impact can Schroeder really have when he's one of the only players on the entire team that can do some of those things. And now if they play together, or you're just getting at least one of them on the court at all times, I think that's just where you start to stretch out a real, identity. They ran on almost a third of Cleveland's misses last night, which is a really high number. And they
rebounded well in this game as well. They really defensive rebounded well in this game against a Cleveland team that has won lately by getting offensive rebounds. That has been a path to success. So their whole thing here was get out and run, get rebounds, and they won.
What about RJ? Anything out of the ordinary? I saw a lot of people with a lot of reactions about how RJ is a new player now.
I just kind of shrug with him, Brendan. I just kind of look at him and I'm like, okay, sure, you're here. That's cool. Like he did not.
You just said you were being convinced he could make a bigger impact than you thought. Now you got to shrug for me.
Well, but
I passed it to you because you gave me a sense that you had some RJ takes.
I think he's like more. I look at every time I look at his numbers. I'll put it this way: I get a little bit like I become very meh on him. You just look at the numbers, I think rawly, and you think, okay, what is this guy actually doing that is especially productive? Then you watch him play, you watch some clips, you understand at least like there's a jack of all tradesness. And he was just like fine, 6 of 12 from the field, had 9 rebounds, had 1 assist, had 5 fouls. Like he was fine. If he is like merely fine for them, that's frankly like it's okay. It's not like offensive. I just imagine if that is that kind of what he ends up as. I think new player's a little bit strong, but I thought he did have some energy in this game. Maybe being back home, I think Toronto as a team had some nice energy in this game, considering they just lost to the Pistons. And like probably just don't want to like be the team that lost the Pistons and then went on their own losing streak of some kind. There's always, I think, that mental component of it. But RJ was fine. He's going to add some nice ball handling. I do kind of want to see at some point like maybe a Schroeder. I don't know. I haven't checked to see how much this played in game 1, but especially they move on from Siakam. Let me just see like quickly Schroeder, RJ. Let's see what that looks like and kind of see how RJ operates if he's kind of almost like the third guy and really needs to attack hard on closeouts and stuff or next to two smaller guards like that. In this situation where it's maybe Pirtle as the center, I mean, this roster is a little bit weird, obviously, but we'll see. I mean, Toronto also, he's going to play heavy minutes. I mean, he only played 29 in this game, but I could see a world where he's playing like above 30 just based on who they played in this game and then how thin they really decided to run this roster.
Yeah, he's going to play a ton.
Like they trade Siakam, Brendan, and there's 40 minutes just like they're going to have to eat up. And like, is Thad Young like going to play like 30 minutes a night down the stretch of the season? Is that where this is headed?
Yeah, Toronto's actually pretty interesting to me as we look forward as a seller. I think even if they, setting the Siakam thing aside and whatever that bidding war looks like and who they get back and what the rotation pans out, I just think a lot of the bottom of their roster has plenty of interesting players too. But I guess maybe if we do that Thursday episode, we can dig into who those guys might be. Gary Trent and Thad and even Otto Porter looks like he can actually stay on the court this year. Maybe he's somebody who surprises us, makes an impact somewhere in a small role. But want to move to our championship tiers?
Yes, let's get into that. So this exercise, Brendan, we've done before. We've done this fully. There's a lot of different ways we can look at this and talk about it. There's going to be certain teams we talk about. So if we don't talk about your favorite team and you're watching or listening, we'll get to them in the future. Do you want to, I believe last time we started with tier 1. Should we start there again?
Yeah, we're going to start with tier 1 again. We have in each category a name, in each tier a name. I didn't have that last time, so bonus content. We have one team that is trending up, one team that is trending down in each group. And then we have the teams we're talking about. So it'll be a little busy, but pretty straightforward at the end of the day. Who's up, who's down, where's everybody in terms of the title picture, and we'll have some key questions and insights along the way. First, want to tell everybody about Homage, an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use the link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. All right, Chris, we have to start with the team of the hour, the team that has moved up into the top tier from the last time. Tier 1 is called the Crowded Top, and it's becoming increasingly more crowded. And the newcomer is the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Hell yeah, brother.
Are they capable of winning the NBA championship as is?
Brendan, I'm skeptical, but I want to find out. I understand impulses to make trades for them.
Typically.
Well, okay, I understand what you're doing to me right here, but let me explain what I'm trying to say. I could see a world where they can make trades and make additions and be aggressive and go for it. Like, and I think that could be really fun. Lauri Markkanen is a name I still think I like for them in terms of fit and what he could provide for them. There's other names you could seek out and find that could be available that I like. Even just getting like a bigger center you trust a little bit more than what they have to just eat some bully ball for Chet for some of these possible playoff series is something I don't hate. But they're also just doing something so unique in this modern NBA that we don't get to see very often of a young team with a specific style, with a guy that is, I think, in the MVP race in Shea, with Chet, who is just unbelievable, and I think probably at this point I believe he still is the favorite for Rookie of the Year in terms of the betting odds and has been contributing on two ends of the floor to winning. They have signature wins. I don't know if they're fully capable of running the gambit right now because it would be kind of so out of line with how this often works, what history tells us about how teams get to titles and wins them. But I want to see them try. I want to see how far they can push this and what they learn from it as they build this out forward. That's really what I want now. Is I want to see take this as far as you can and then evolve from there. That's what I want.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking about as a comparison point to describe what I think the Thunder should do at the deadline is they need to find their Bellinelli and Ilyasova trades. Remember the first process Sixers team that broke out and they got Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova, and it was just, we need some vets who play basketball the way we play it and don't make mistakes and can shoot. And they got that. They plugged those guys into what Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and JJ Redick and everybody else, Dario Saric, were doing on that team. And I believe they won 50 games, and I think that was the year of the confetti series against Boston in the playoffs, and had some moments there, and they were off to the races as a young core. That's what I feel like the Thunder need, and I think one of the things is going to be some kind of size, because they absolutely cannot rebound. They're bottom 3 in both offensive rebound rate and defensive rebound rate as a team. You see, there are just not even the best players, not even the biggest, most physically overwhelming guys in the league, but most of the centers that Chet Holmgren faces are able to box him out without much of an issue. And he just isn't a huge factor on the glass. And even on the nights when he grabs a bunch, it's like, okay, well then who else, right? Because Jalen Williams is like their power forward, and he in 2005 he would have been playing shooting guard. So it's just not tenable.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that they need. I also do think that they need a shooter. Like, how long can you ride Lou Dort being a 40+% guy this season? Isaiah Joe is nice. What happens to Kassan Wallace when it's like, hey, Rook, you're going to need to knock down 40% of your open threes for us to win multiple playoff rounds. Hope you don't mind that. You know what I mean? Like, I like a little more security there. So those would probably be the two things. Does that sound right to you? Are there other needs I'm missing?
No, I mean, I think the rebounding one is it. I think that's both some Chet insurance and protection, and you're going to see some bigs out west. Like, you could see the Wolves, who play 2 bigs and are pretty physical, and you could see some issues there, even if there's ways they cause issues the other way. You could see Anthony Davis in the way the Lakers play. You could see a certain guy named Nikola Jokic. Even if they've beaten Denver twice in Denver this year, it's still Jokic. There's a litany of bigs that can kind of run at them in a certain way, and just some kind of size would do them well.
Who checks the boxes you're describing? Because when you say it that way, it makes me think it's a little bit bigger than an Ersan Ilyasova level addition. If you're saying somebody who can guard the guys you just listed off, that feels like
it's
a lot.
Not even good. It's not guard. I don't know if it's guard so much as like, can you foul them sometimes? Can you like help us eat like 10, 15 minutes just to navigate it this year? I mean, I don't know if I'm them, just because of how good Chet is, that I want to go and expunge like real assets on a center right now. Even if you have all of these assets.
Yeah, the people who talk about them acquiring like a real center, Chet is a center. I've heard that out there. And I do not understand it.
It's like, do I? Well, okay. So the name that I heard read on a podcast was them talking like, okay, should they just like try to like get Jared Allen if the Cavs need to pivot? It's like, why? Like, I think that's overpaying for really what you kind of need. So like Robert Williams, if he hadn't gotten hurt, would have been like the right level of guy where it's like you don't really need him a ton, can play off and like really roam. We saw him do that, but he's hurt and he's not available. And then I think that makes your market like a little bit trickier in some ways as well, right? Like I don't know exactly.
That's the other part of it that trips me up that you mentioned at the top is playing with this team is not going to be easy. I don't know. Like, I don't think people realize.
They ask so many questions of other teams. No, they ask so many questions of other teams that other teams cannot answer. And yes, I understand how young they are, and I understand like the concern, and I think it's valid. But they're also gonna like get the Wolves and cause them a bunch of problems because Chet's a fucking alien, and Shea is shit.
But I also just
they're gonna cause problems in this
too.
way.
Like they do crazy stuff. Like basically Isaiah Joe and Kassan Wallace are fours. They start possessions in the paint. They have these moments where you just have to kind of be okay letting the J-Dub or SGA show roll on for a while and just put your head down and compete like crazy on defense. And their defense, speaking of, is one of the more connected units in the league, which is crazy for how young they are, but also speaks to the difficulty of integrating a new piece into the team, right? So I like that's another part of why I'm really skeptical of the value of really going and adding even somebody like Lauri Markkanen, who we all agreed when we brought Wes on and talked about those trades that, of course, he fits kind of the mold of, okay, they need a guy that size, they need a shooter, they, whatever. But I just think the idea of plugging something really new that's pretty big into this team is much easier said than done, considering how cohesive they look. And they're winning anyway. So I think it's a big ask for the coaching staff, for the other players, and for the player that they would bring on to make some kind of huge addition. But I also feel like, to your point, they could face a team and just feel like they're kicking themselves because one of these obvious weaknesses bites them and they lose in the first round in 5 and end up kind of disappointing all of us relative to expectations.
The other way this could go, too, I would say kind of the last thing I have on them is maybe there's some value, Brendan, getting to the playoffs and seeing how you bend and how you break and how you don't bend and how you don't break, and then let the playoffs kind of make an informed roster decision instead of right now, which even if we think Markkanen's a great fit, and I think you would be, or if you bought a veteran like Bojan Bogdanovic, she'd be like a bigger 4 and all of that stuff, and it'd be relatively low cost on the fringe of your rotation. Maybe there's some value in letting your young guys get into the playoffs like this for the first time and swim or sink, pass or fail, figure it out, and use what you see from those guys in the playoffs to make informed decisions about what your roster's like and figure it out from there.
Yeah.
There is rush, but there's not so much rush that they're like, no one's window is forever, but if there's any team that has a little bit of room to maybe hold off just a little bit on being really aggressive, it's probably them.
Yeah, of course it's them, but I think the Giddey part of it is the most time-sensitive aspect of this whole thing, because not only are you probably selling low right now, but maybe not. I don't know. You're definitely selling low. Is it the lowest? I don't know. Maybe he just is less of a dominant NBA player than we would have thought. I have no way of answering that question, but any opposing front office might feel that way. Okay, what is he really adding? Do I really want to invest in that situation right now? And then if they don't trade him, now they have to be the team to extend him this offseason. So that part of it is very fascinating. He was great in the play-in. He was one of the only guys who didn't feel a little hesitant. And I would feel good about that he'll rise to that occasion again, but he's not playing great, and he's obviously the odd man out in a lot of the ways you would look forward with this roster. So that part of it's going to be obviously huge to monitor as well. But let's move on to the rest of this tier, which includes the Bucks, the Sixers, the Nuggets, and the Celtics. I don't have a trending up team. I guess it would be the Thunder, but they're all already at the top.
It is.
Yeah, it's the Thunder if you had to pick one, but
Yeah.
Where are they going to go up from here? They're in Tier 1, so I didn't include that. But the Sixers trending down was mine, and that's mostly just because Embiid is hurt, but I also think that they're coming a little back down to earth with some of the role players, and I think there's a realization setting in that, hey, they probably don't have enough to be at the very, very top. I put them here out of respect because of the seasons that Embiid and Maxey are having, but I don't know if your third best player being one of Melton, Harris, or Batum every night is really going to get you over the finish line the way that you want. So they're my trending down. But you said you had some thoughts on Boston. I told you when we did our Christmas next day show that to me they were the favorites and I would pick them against the field. So that's kind of where I'm at still. What do you have on Boston?
I have a Jason Tatum question for you because I have a dear friend from college who is a Jason Tatum. He is a diehard Celtics fan. And if there's one thing that I guess I'm kind of watching, and tell me how big of a deal you think this is, when he gets into little slumps, I think sometimes he can force his looks and just settle for threes to try to get himself out of them. Do you think he sometimes makes it a little hard on himself when he's gets in these little funks and should just kind of take more of what's given to him at times instead of forcing the issue in certain instances? This is a very small thing with them, but it's something that as he pointed it out, now I can't.
What do you mean by forcing the issue?
He'll just take threes to try to get out of a slump and kind of force shots when there's probably a better shot available with a little bit more patience, maybe a read, maybe a give and go, maybe just getting into the mid range instead of just hoisting a three.
I mean, yeah, that isn't that the whole problem with their team? That's like the number one asterisk on any optimism you would have about Boston. I guess my question back to your Celtics loving buddy is, did he not notice that until now? They lost the finals because they kept
going
chucking
through a little
crazy
bit of
shots and turning the ball over.
Yeah, I think he's just good. Number one, this is in a group text with our buddy Bill DiFilippo, who likes to rev this friend up a little bit. As you know, Brendan, Bill can be a little bit of a let's turn those gears a little bit. So I think there's part of that. Number two, I think he's just like kind of staring at this team, like absolutely capable of winning a title, and just trying not to let himself get too excited. And that would be one of the things that, to your point, like we already knew this, would spook me a little bit. I also I'm like really ready for them to just like end up with 4 All-Stars. I think it'd be I don't know if it's gonna happen, but I feel like it's so out. The Derek White All-Star discourse now is just like hit like somewhat mainstream NBA Twitter stuff. And I'm now just kind of ready for that like full unpacking of what that's going to look like. And do they like end up with 4 All-Stars somehow based on how good they've been and what those guys are doing?
Or as I said, maybe
I think I'm also getting to
in. He might have the worst case.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm also getting to where I think I might just have them as my favorite, even if I don't want to give up on I feel like that's like almost rude to Jokic, and I said some crazy stuff about the Sixers. At the end of the year, I was sick. I take it back, I guess. But Boston. Let me ask you this about Boston. Do you think they need to go get anything like at this deadline? Do you think is there any trade they like should make? They don't have a ton of assets, obviously. Is there something on the margins you think they could like use an upgrade on?
I don't really think so. But I think if it was anything, it would just be if there's a rotation player, especially, I would say a wing, who you can get. They're not the deepest team, so I would go try to do that. The problem is you're probably talking about flipping Pritchard into that, and then you're really not getting any more rotation players. You're just turning the rotation player you have from a guard to a wing. You know what I mean? So I just look at what they are working with, and I don't see anything particularly exciting. I know like Michael Pina of The Ringer has been popularizing the John Conchar idea. I know some people would like them to go get a big, but you're talking about John Conchar level players, which is probably a 9th or 10th man. They made their moves.
Yeah, if they like named Andre Drummond, I wouldn't hate that as like depth, but I'd also don't want Andre Drummond like playing in the playoffs. Something has gone wrong if Drummond's like playing 20 minutes a game for them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I brought up Drummond as a Suns target, and the people who like that team that follow me on Twitter, all of them pointed to, because a lot of Suns fans are adopted Suns fans who really are just KD stans, they pointed me to the 2022 first round playoff series that the Brooklyn Nets played, in which Andre Drummond was their starting center, and things went very awry. If you remember, these Boston Celtics swept the absolute shit out of them. So, yeah, not what you want. So we'll see what Boston does. But tier number 2, one hang up.
Let's go to tier 2.
Is what it's called. This group includes the Phoenix Suns, the Miami Heat, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who I believe have been demoted. The Thunder have replaced them at the top. And the Los Angeles Clippers.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a troll question first, Brennan, before we dive into all these teams? Should you have put the Suns in tier 3? No. One move away?
Well, they don't have any moves, so I would have had to rename the group because there's no move to make.
Okay.
And second of all, the team... Beal will fix most of this, got served a pretty huge W the past week, because the Suns, after their deepest, darkest, worst moment of the year on Christmas, have now won 4 straight since then, and Beal has been part of 3 of those wins. So people who felt that they were just, not whole, and let's wait till we see it, okay, fair enough. Maybe they were right. I have the Suns as the trending up team, actually, Chris. Not that I think necessarily by the next time we do this that they'll be up there at the crowded top, but of these 4 teams, I think the Suns are headed up more than anyone else. And I have the Wolves as the trending down team, and maybe we can start with them.
Well, let's just do the Suns, because I want you to sell me on this. I want
didn't have them starred in the outline, Chris. I don't have notes on the Suns. But what do you want me to tell you? I think that they're a team that is capable of winning a championship. All four of these teams still are. My one hang-up on them, if I'm going to use the name of the tier, is everything that went wrong the first half of the season. Not only can they stay healthy, but did the loss of the time that they could have been using to gel going to catch up with them? We don't know what the fuck their rotation is still, at all. They played two-way guys most of this 4-game win streak as part of their 9-man rotation, and the defense is always going to be a question mark. So that's not one hang-up, but I guess it would just be the way the team was constructed in general is a little bit of a hang-up for me. So until they blow me over the head with proving it, I'm still going to have them probably a tick below some of these other teams.
I just wanted you to vamp on the Suns. I love hearing you talk about the Suns, and this is cool. All right, let's go to the Wolves. So you have names you have names on here in our doc as a shooter at the deadline, and there's one name on there that I really, really like. So let's start.
Okay, well, the reason I have them there is because, and the reason they're trending down, and the reason I wanted to hit on them is their offense is 18th in the NBA now.
Yeah, which this doesn't totally surprise me if you just think about, even with Chris Finch's reputation. I think if you just think about this roster in the starting five in particular, and just kind of think about what it is and what these guys are, that feels right to me. Like if you're kind of just going based on, okay, what are these guys? How do they all fit? What are the limitations? That to me makes sense, even if it's not great, obviously, and it kind of speaks to maybe where Ant is and maybe just some of the lack of some other issues kind of going on. Well, I know you have some good cat stuff we should get to. There's something in the personnel that feels right to me that the offense has ended up at 18th. There's something just mucky about the roster.
If that feels right to you, then they probably shouldn't even be in this tier. A team with the 18th best offense in the NBA is not winning the NBA championship, period. Not in 2023.
No, but I think I think it is. But I think there are fixes would be the thing, and the defense has been so good. I think the talent, as far as just maybe getting a little more juice out of Cat. You have these turnover stats that maybe get you a little bit going and just a little momentum in that way. This team also just. I mean, they have the financial stuff that hangs over this team. And there's not really a trade they can make, obviously. I just also wonder what this team would look like with a point guard who, I love Mike Conley, but I wonder if just a younger, Mike Conley 4 years ago would be such a big difference for the team. I think just a little more verve, a little more just.
You're going to have to establish a definition of verve
Apex, still past prime.
Because, with Quickley and Conley, I don't think people think of them as the same type of guy, and you're using that word it has a very clear definition. I'm not tracking it, if I'm being honest, because Schroeder doesn't have it.
All right.
Quickley does. Conley does.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm lost here, but look, I think it does boil down to Towns, because if Ant is where he is and asking him to lead a championship offense at his age on his rookie contract, I mean, you're talking about who's on that list, in the past 20 years. LeBron, Durant, Derrick Rose. Am I done already of guys who really did that?
Yeah.
So that's probably unreasonable.
Yeah, Curry didn't do it. Yeah, Jimmy Butler didn't. Those guys did it.
Yeah, it has
Luka
to be
didn't
Cat
do it.
if Ant is just still developing, which is fair. And there was a great article at Canis Hoopus, which is the SB Nation Wolves blog, breaking down Towns' post-ups and how they've been using him more in that area, but it's still a little bit of a work in progress. He's scoring better, but maybe passing worse. Overall, his turnovers are much worse, Chris, and that's probably the number one fixable thing that this team is dealing with, is they're atrocious. Everybody on the team besides Mike Conley turns the ball over way too much, and they play really slow. So those things all kind of combine, and no offensive rebounds to really require that first shot offense to be elite, and they're not an incredible shooting team. So you're putting yourself in a little bit of a box, and I'm not going to blame all of that on Chris Finch. I agree with you. He has a good reputation. I loved the Boogie Cousins, Anthony Davis offenses too, but do better. Like, this is not, like, big picture, how this offense is structured is not what you would do if you were trying to win a championship. So I think Towns will probably continue to develop, being used slightly differently. I think that you would expect Ant to be better in April than he is now because he's still at that portion of his career and doing new things every night. I think guys like Jaden McDaniels probably need to be more aggressive in general. Like, he's a great shooter. He takes like 3 threes a game. That's just a very weird dynamic with him. And, I think that could be said for a lot of these guys. But I agree there is a certain structure to their offense. I don't think it's going to be 18th. I think that is lower than I would have expected and what I would want. And that brings us to the shooters at the deadline that you mentioned at the top, which the names I had were Royce O'Neal, Corey Kispert, and Cedi Osman. Which of the 3 intrigued you?
Royce O'Neal. Corey Kispert maybe, but I'm Cedi Osman. Will shoot it. Not a bad player. Serviceable NBA player. Absolutely, like, not a guy that can play in the playoffs. He will get there, and he will get hunted and bullied and has the happiest feet of any wing that you could possibly get. He'd be really cheap, though, so there's something to that. O'Neal's the one I like because he's like, yes, is he big enough to maybe be the rugged kind of wing you totally love? No, but do you need him to be when you have A, that backline, and B, you have McDaniels? So I like the shooting. I like the comfort. He's played on playoff teams before. That's the name that I like because I think he's the most ready-made for a team that is going somewhere. And you could look at Kispert as maybe a longer-term investment, but you'd be banking on, okay, how does he actually turn out? Cedi, I think you kind of just know what he is. That's not a guy I think is scaling up to 16 games. I think O'Neal is a 16-game player, and I think he would fit perfectly in a bunch of different looks for this team. I had a galaxy brain thought for like 2 seconds when I was doing notes for this, Brendan, of do you just have to get ahead of the financial stuff with Cat? But I think he's playing too well to even consider that. I think you just have to kind of ride this out and figure it out later.
It's just, what the hell do you say to your fans when you're having the best season since Kevin Garnett was around and you blow it up? You can't do that.
You have to worry about this in the summer when, you have to, I think, push this out until you can't avoid it anymore, and then you have to like go into like selling mode of like why you had to do it for the sake of Ant.
Yeah, but I think it's an easier sell when you're able to reformulate your team. There's no version of this trade that doesn't make them worse, even if the value of a Cat trade ends up being something we all give like an A+ in a podcast afterward.
No.
You can't
100%.
say we're going to just
100%.
set an atomic bomb off on our roster when we have the 1 seed, right? So that I just think that's a non-starter, to be honest with you. But I like the O'Neal thing. Also, he's the best player of those 3, so of course I think we're both going to gravitate there. I'm sure there's other guys, but it's an interesting spot for them too because Kyle Anderson is somebody that they're going to lose this summer, I think, because the amount that it would cost to re-sign him is just not going to be worth it to them for the role that he plays. But right now, he's kind of their backup point guard. I like Ant and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and even Cat at times are their playmakers, but in terms of guys who can kind of initiate an offense, throw an entry pass, that type of stuff, Slow-Mo is their backup 1. So all the guys they would trade are contributors now, so there is a little bit of an element of setting the bomb off no matter who they trade. It's just going to be, threading that needle of doing something. But I think they have to move. I think a trade or series of trades where they maybe shed some salary while also feeling a little better about their roster, if they can do that, I think, they're kind of cooking with fire at that point. But we'll see what they do. I think it's kind of an inflection point for their season because the offense just it can't stay this bad, like I said, and expect to compete for a championship.
The other position I would think about for them is backup point guard. Monty Morris, Tyus Jones. Like I know the finding those right deals is tricky, and I don't know how many things they really can do. But I do think just a better backup point guard than what they've had so far. I think that there's some food on there for them too, just to get a better table setter for that second unit. Particularly if it's one that I think could play in the playoffs if you
well, and even if right, Kyle Anderson is doing that, or some of these other guys have chipped in there, brings us back to the first stat that I pointed out, which is they're turning the ball over like crazy. And so what is really Kyle Anderson doing as your backup initiator if he's also part of that problem? I think if you could clean that up a little bit. And they started bringing Jordan McLaughlin back into the rotation recently, and I think that's them realizing, hey, we need the small dude who's steady. Like, forget the cute lineups. We just need, to not make mistakes here, and so maybe they look for that in trade too. Let's move to the next tier, which is one move away. Here we have the New York Knicks, who we just spent the beginning of the show talking about. They are the one I have trending up because of that trade. I have the Lakers trending down. Mm-hmm. I have the Dallas Mavericks because I really just want them to get Pascal Siakam, and I don't buy their team unless they improve on defense. And then we have the Sacramento Kings, who I think might be multiple moves away, but clearly appear set up for a trade. I wanted to start with them, though, Chris, because De'Aaron Fox is even better this year than he was last year. I think he's putting to bed who the best player on this team is, the one you want to be really, truly building around long term, and resting any sort of questions about if he can be a legitimate offensive engine at the highest levels. I think that answer is yes. He's making 41% of his threes, 41% of his pull-up threes, and everything else is pretty much staying static. That one ingredient was all that was missing. He was already an all-NBA caliber guy last year. Now he's that plus more. So his season has been incredible. I think we did a deep dive on him early on, and we were kind of like, all right, let's see if the shooting holds, and it's held.
He has been unreal. I think this side of, like, maybe just because he's West Coast and I'm missing this, but I feel like in the world where there's been a lot of Halliburton and deservedly so, a lot of Max and deservedly so talk, and a lot of Shea talk, he's having one of those guard years that is, you're just like, what can't this dude do? What can't this guy be? And I think if you're thinking just about the playoffs, I mean, this alleviates to me. Obviously, he had some injury stuff there last year, but this alleviates to me some of the concerns I might have for them in the playoffs. Like, this raises my expectations, or at least my understanding, I think, of what their capabilities are. That's the kind of season Fox is having. And, Brendan, I think it would be a mistake if they don't buy. I think they have to buy. In some way, shape, or form, whether it's one trade, whether it's a couple smaller trades, whether it's just like a new set of tires on the fringes of the bench, if that's all that works out, okay. But I need this team to just do something. You can't assume that you're just going to have this kind of Fox like rolling forever. You kind of just got to strike while the iron is in front of you with what this team is, and invest in its potential a little bit. And I want to see them just be a little bold here at the deadline. You said you want Dallas to go get Siakam. I just want the Kings to go get Siakam. I think that, to me, has become my favorite Siakam fit. We've talked about it on the show before, but I would love the downhill energy he could give them. I love the capability of maybe just giving different looks and not totally always needing a traditional backup center. I love another ball handler. I love how big Keegan Murray would make them.
That's the thing I love the most
wing.
Is how much bigger he would make them. That's like the number one selling point that I could get behind it for sure.
And it's just like, okay, you don't have to rely on Harrison Barnes anymore. Like, that in itself is a win for a team that is ready for that next step. And there's the funniest reporting. I was like, we didn't do this in slop, but it's been reported that they're like not going to dangle Keegan Murray. It's like, no shit, they're not going to dangle Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray's awesome. You should not trade Keegan Murray for an expiring Siakam. But if you can find another way to do it, and it's a pick and whatever it is, I think even if you don't even 100% know he wants to stay or what that looks like, I'm rolling the dice on this. I want them to be aggressive and go for it. Go get
advice
Pascal.
For any beat reporter who might ever listen to our show. I'll give it out when maybe there's more of them who might be doing that. I don't know if we have a lot of beat reporter listeners right now, Chris, but is easy reporting, easy scoop to get. Franchise cornerstone will not be traded at deadline. You can get it confirmed. Call the assistant GM whose number you got on media day, and there you go. They're not going to trade Keegan Murray. Who would have thought their second best player or second most concrete building block is not going anywhere? There you go. Yeah, I think the Herder Barnes package is a pretty no-brainer thing to try to explore at the deadline, and I think that's why you've already heard a lot of stuff about them being eager. They just benched Kevin Herder. His shot has not fallen this year.
Yep, I was just going to say.
It's just sort of right there for them to poke around at. The problem is both of those guys are under long-term deals, so, does Toronto want that? I don't know. Does anyone want those two under contract for 2 seasons beyond this? I don't know, but hopefully they can find a taker, maybe add some picks and stuff to sweeten it up a little bit. But they're the obvious kind of, it's called one move away for a reason. They're on that list. Let's move on to the Lakers, though, as we continue on this tier. I have them trending down. I caught the ugly first half that they played against the Pelicans the other night. Some of that was a hot CJ McCollum shooting performance that happens sometimes, but the bigger thing is the Lakers don't put themselves in position to keep up with a night like that because they're determined to play the most bizarre, huge lineups that they possibly can for reasons that I don't get. They're now starting Vanderbilt and Rui and Prince. Reeves is still coming off the bench. And I don't think I've seen anybody out there who understands this, Chris. I don't know what they're doing with this lineup or how they're constructing this roster based on any evidence of what wins in the modern NBA, what wins around LeBron, what wins, period. I don't know why you would make this move.
Yeah, I'm a little worried, I guess. And I was buying Lakers stock. I was buying, I think, some optimism about them. But right now, the offense is settled into 20th in the league. It's just not good enough. You're getting some LeBron quotes about needing them to execute better and talking about the benefits of them not having to travel as much because they won't be as tired and all this stuff. Like, we're getting into kind of like classic LeBron is annoyed zone and inventing, I think, some things. But I don't know there are trades they can make that I think would make them better in theory. Like, I think they could be bold and go for like Levine wouldn't be terrible to me. Like the Murray thing that's kind of been out there. It feels like a very clutch. Like I understand it's not always.
Let me ask you a question about DeJounte Murray. How much better than Gabe Vincent is he?
I don't think he's worth the money difference, and I think if people haven't look, maybe there's some situation involved, but he's not the defender in Atlanta that he was in San Antonio.
And
he's just not.
Honestly, I've seen a lot of that going around online too. I am not sure his reputation defensively. Obviously, as a young guy, I know there was a lot to be excited about. But I think we always have to temper our expectations when a dude is as small as he is. What's the best version of DeJounte Murray defensively? A one-position defender who's still going to get attacked in the playoffs just because he's small?
I think he had flashes of being like a two-guard position thing where like before he got traded to Atlanta, in Cleveland he was talked about as like, okay, should they trade for DeJounte Murray if that's a thing? And when I looked at it, I thought, okay, I think there's a world where he can defend some twos and you can play him next to another guard, but it's not the guy that we've seen in Atlanta. Like, it's just not. He's more of an offensive-oriented guy now. His game, what he is, I think, has shifted since he got to Atlanta. Again, could that change? Yeah, but I'd be skeptical. I mean, you'd have to be really sure, and it's kind of like your one move if you go that route, and you're paying like it's not a slam dunk move. I mean, I would rather go like the Levine route, and I don't even know how crazy I am about that. If I'm the
one that I thought of is Terry Rozier as a smaller kind of. Try to improve the offense this year, get somebody that's a vet who can put buckets up. And he is a little bit of a risk because I think in Boston he had a reputation for being a little trigger happy, and now he's gotten to fulfill those hopes and dreams in Charlotte for 4 years. But he is still a vet, and I think a lot of times the LeBron aura has had a good impact on guys like that to rein it in a little bit. And he can make threes, and he is small, but if you're having him on the court to close games with Reeves and LeBron and AD and Prince or something, I think you're insulating him a little bit, and it kind of gets back to that thing of if your options are one position or, in Levine's case, zero position defenders, why not try a little bit more of an offensive guy who at least we think can defend like point guards, you know? Like, I guess he could. Though I don't even know, thinking about the West, who he really can guard, because there's not really small guards. Steph. He could guard Steph, you know, like, or Fox, probably, right? Like, smaller guys. Like, okay, give me that. But, yeah, I agree with you. There's not an easy fix for them, and it's to the point in the season where it's kind of hard to watch them or think about them and not just start thinking about trades, because I think Darvin Ham is telling us, hey, I don't have answers here.
One of the trade you could do that would be simple too for Rozier, and just looking at this real quick, you have to wait till January 15th, obviously, when because an extension. But D'Lo and like Maxwell Lewis is enough money to match Rozier. It can, or pick if it's one of the bigs that are making a little bit more money, fine. Like it's that simple. And I don't know how many picks you. This is the other thing about this. That if I'm the Lakers, this would appeal to me. Is I bet you could get Rozier for less picks than it's going to cost to get anything
Probably
else.
Probably could get him for
whether it's
like
DeJounte
a fake
Murray
first, like one fake first that's like lottery
That's what I'm
protected
saying.
for 5 years and then becomes like 2 seconds or something. It's Terry Rozier, and he's going to leave.
That's
anyway.
what I'm saying. You don't. Yeah, the Lakers, the Levine would cost real stuff. I would suspect DeJounte would cost real stuff. They don't have a lot of real stuff to trade. I don't hate like that kind of guard at a lower price. I like that idea quite a bit. I hadn't thought of that before, Brendan, but I like that, and I think the Hornets should be a team that should just be selling guys like that if they all can. Just get rid of them, get
Gordon
something
Hayward,
out of them.
Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. I even think we talked about
and there if there's a thing about Rozier too, as a guy like that guy is not scared of yes, he can be trigger happy and maybe a little shot happy at times, and LeBron would LeBron would push back against that at times, I think. But A, he's played with that kind of guy before, and two, Rozier will not be I think phased by going into a playoff run. We haven't really seen it from him,
back in
obviously,
Boston.
But that guy's not going to get spooked. Yeah, it's just been a while because he played for the Charlotte Hornets now. But there's not going to be spooked Terry Rozier if they're in Denver and they need him to take some shots in a game 6. He's not going to be scared by the moment. He's just going to be scary Terry and be himself and shoot a lot. And that's not a horrible thing for a team that just needs something to add to their offense.
All right, next tier. Fun but flawed. There's a lot of teams in here. The Indiana Pacers, who I moved down. They were one of the prominent droppers here. The Houston Rockets, I believe I also moved them down. The Golden State Warriors, who I actually have as trending up because they have seemed to fix some things rotation-wise that have helped, although now they're back to starting really small with Chris Paul in there, so maybe I jumped the gun on that one. The Pelicans are in here. The Magic are in here. I have the Cavs trending down. Mm-hmm. And I have the Grizzlies, who were lower than this before. They have moved up into this group to round us out here. Let's start with the Cavs, because I threw a question your way on where Cavs fans actually are in the grand scheme of the budding Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes that I think every NBA fan on Twitter and Reddit wants to start exploring. But is that, and we heard this week that I think it was from Zach Lowe that they're not trying to trade Donovan yet.
It has been reported by every single insider. Mark Stein had it, Zach Lowe had it, Shams had it, Jake Fisher had it. Every big national person has had some version of the Cavs are not really looking to trade Donovan Mitchell right now.
Do Cavs fans think they should?
I think it's split. I think you have some people that are, if he's going to go, just get out ahead of it. But I also think people also look at him as this is the best guy on this team. Why are you rushing to trade the guy who's the best player on this team? Because he is. Evan Mobley's development, he's hurt right now, but Mobley's development has not really progressed. You has let him ascend into that spot. Darius Garland has not had a great year, and he's out with a jaw injury right now. He's the best guy in the team, even with some of the warts, even with some of the things about him that make him imperfect, let's say. So to me, I would be very scared to trade him at this deadline. I think to your point about what we talked about Towns earlier, I don't know how you sell it. I really don't know how you can be hey, look, we had Mitchell for a year and a half, and if we trade him at this deadline, it's going to be for we can't even give you another star back in return. We can't even you might end up getting 80 cents on the dollar anyway, but I think 80 cents on the dollar in season. What message that could send to your team, but also your the fan base. I don't think that's a good one. There's not really a lot of good. I think that can come from just the mechanics of that trade.
Similar to Minnesota.
Season. I mean,
what we were talking about with Towns.
Yeah, except the Wolves are winning more games. The Cavs have the net rating of a 41 win team right now.
Yeah, but their season didn't go down the drain. You know what I mean? And so to willingly
No.
get worse
No.
with no
And
action
like,
plan besides, hey, March and April are going to suck. You ready? Buy a ticket. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna be the 10. We're gonna be the 10. Yeah, and I think there are other things levers I would pull. I still think, can you trade Jared Allen somewhere to play Mobley at the 5 is something you will could see explored. I just think this year they've never felt like they had a real identity to me, Brendan, which is to me like I think one of the most jarring things about it.
Did they
played
last year?
Really frisky as of late. I think they did last year. I think I think it was how like their defense just kept them in games, and they were really tough. I think that was the backbone of it. We have the best defense in the league in terms of defensive rating. We have these two bigs. We're going to smother you in that way. That hasn't been there this year, dude. Injuries, but the defense is now like top 10, but it's not nearly as doesn't have the teeth it did last year. And then this stretch they're in right now with Mitchell missing time with an illness, Garland's out with the jaw, Mobley's out with the knee. They're playing these like crazy offensive heavy lineups. And they're going after offensive rebounds. They basically are winning games when they get a bunch of offensive rebounds, and they're losing when they don't. Like they lost to the Bucks in a game they didn't offensive run, lost to the Pelicans, just lost to Toronto. They're not 0-2 since Mitchell came back from his illness. They have 3 easy games this week that I think could help them just get some good energy going, but they're in a weird spot just as far as where they actually can go from here. And I think even with some of the things that have been better lately, it seems to me like the ceiling of this team now is like, are you at best like the 5th seed in the East? And like that's a very uncomfortable place, I think, for them to end up at.
Interesting. I think that they will be in the trade rumors. I feel like I personally would bet against them trading Donovan or Jared Allen in February, but that's just my external.
I would look at Ricky Rubio and Dean Wade as like the contracts to trade, and then like you're gonna get some pretty mid stuff back as a result.
So let's move on to the Orlando Magic. Question on them. Could Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero both be all-stars this season? And I'll run through, and you tell me if I missed any names in the East or if I included somebody who doesn't deserve it. But I had the 4 Celtics guys who you mentioned earlier in the show: Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Bam Adebayo, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Donovan, who we just talked about, Trae Young, Scotty Barnes, and Cade Cunningham. And Cade, I know, is not going to make the All-Star team, but low-key maybe should. So I just wanted to include him. But that's not a lot of names, to be honest with you, and especially if you take Cade out. And I have, obviously, Franz and Paolo as kind of knocking on the door. I don't think it's crazy to imagine them both making it in, considering the team's success and how much is on their plate, in my opinion. These guys also play a shit ton of minutes. Like you'll just open up a Magic box score lately. It's like 38 and 39 minutes or 36 and 38 minutes, just routinely. And they're both averaging over 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists a game on 47% shooting. They also, weirdly, Chris, their stats are like identical. They're averaging the same amount of field goals made and attempted per game as one another. And then I just mentioned both 21 points, both 6-7 rebounds, 4-5 assists a game, 1 steal, and a half a block. It's eerie, but tell me what you think. Can they both get in? Are we going to have 2 Orlando All-Stars in 2024?
I think it's really possible. There's a case for Franz over like even Porzingis and Butler and Adebayo if you're looking at like in Randall as far as like the kind of guys that are beyond the starters in the front court. I think it would be easier if they were like the 3rd seed in the East and maybe they end up there and maybe they pull away a little bit in that regard and kind of put themselves in that range. I think that could, if they just kind of end up winning enough games and get that kind of PR boost from that, I think that certainly could help them. But I think there's, at the very, very least, I think that there's a ton of merit to the idea that they should have 2 All-Stars. You could make the case over Franz over guys that I think are going to get in. You know, I mean, you could look at like watch Jimmy will sneak in or whatever, and maybe they're or Franz over Jaylen Brown, Franz over, if you want to compare him against some of the guards, you can make a case for him over some of the guards as well, considering he's contributing to winning and is playing at a really high level. I think you could, if you really wanted to, I would favor Paolo, but I could see like a case that like Franz should be like a more deserving All-Star than Paolo. You could make the argument to me that it should be Franz's spot and not even Paolo's spot. But I think it's totally reasonable. Like they could get two. It'd be very fun if they did. Can you imagine the video that Orlando Magic would post with the Orlando Magic song they use all the time? Like Orlando Magic. You know what I'm talking about? Have you seen these?
I think you're right that
the All-Star video for that would just be like, did Mac McClung go to their G League team, or did I hallucinate that?
I don't
he just
remember
went somewhere else.
Where he's currently at. I can't lie that I have not been keeping up.
Yeah, he plays for the he plays for the Osceola Magic. Right. I'm just saying, Magic All-Star Weekend takeover. Mac McClung defends his dunk contest championship, and we get Franz and Paolo. I think that sounds like a great time.
So I think you're probably right that only one makes it, would be my prediction, and it's an interesting case on either side because their stats are so identical, and the fact that the advanced stats don't favor them, and that's true of a lot of Magic. The best players on the Magic, because their bench has been so good. The advanced stats show that a lot of the time they're better when the bench is in, which is going to screw a lot of that stuff up. Franz grades out a little bit better in the advanced stats, but Paolo has some of the clutch moments and, dominant scoring games that tend to flash for the, random radio color commentator who lives in, Dallas and has to vote on this, right? Like that's who you're talking about a lot of the time, unless it gets to, obviously at a certain point it gets to the coaches, and that's where you could see these guys benefit. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think one has to make it. You're talking about a top 4 team with 2 deserving guys. One of them has to make it. I hope both do. I think there is certainly a case for both of them to make it. And great, on their way to more, I think. But just wanted to throw that at you. All right, tier number 5. Always a couple games out of the East play-in. We're only going to talk about one team here because we already hit on the Raptors, and these teams are all a little weird, a little boring, and kind of suck. The Nets, the Raptors, the Hawks, and the Bulls. The Bulls is who I want to focus on. Zach LaVine out. They are 9-6 with him out of the lineup, mostly as a result of Kobe White blowing up. He is averaging, or in the month of December, he averaged 23, 6, and 6 in 38 minutes per game, which I don't know why they're playing that guy so much, and 59% true shooting.
Brenny's playing so much because you can't exercise the demon of Tibbs out of your building. Feels like. Like Tibbs, like it's a curse.
And OG Anunoby has now entered the curse, but so I don't think they're going to fully blow it up. I think that Kobe White did the biggest favor of all to Chicago Bulls ownership by giving them the out of not having to, because they don't want to. But if they were going to be awful, they would have. Now they're not awful, so here we are once again. Vooch is hurt. I don't think that they're going to trade him. I'm sure they will look long and hard at DeMar, but I think the more logical route here, and I think, inevitably it sucks to talk about trades with so many teams, but that's kind of the point in the season we're at, and especially with the Bulls, they've been in the news. The reality probably is that I think they should try to do both, but that's pretty hard to do. But if you could trade LaVine and maybe a couple of these role players get a little bit younger and more flexible for the future, I think that there's actually kind of a pathway here for the basketball community to feel like a lot better about Chicago after the deadline, especially if they have a legit starting caliber point guard in Kobe White, who's under a really good contract and can get some more stuff, whatever that looks like. So can you trade LaVine and Caruso and, Torrey Craig and Javon Carter all away, still be competitive, and maybe get some interesting stuff going forward? Am I just being too optimistic that pathway even exists, Chris?
I think you have to. I think you should just burn it all down. It's just kind of my instinct. I just.
I guess, do you agree with my thinking that they are too good for ownership to pull the trigger on the reset? Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I think ownership could look at that and say like, believe that, but I think that's lying to you. I just think that's lying to yourself. I don't believe that this is like that Kobe White is suddenly like a real 23 6-6 guy. I think he's on something of like a hot run, playing a lot of minutes right now. I think the best path forward here is still just sell. Like whatever you can sell, I think it's just kind of time to do it. It'll be painful in the short term. It will not be fun. I understand the PR hit of it, but I mean they prep for this. There's a reason they're getting like the '90s Bulls back and doing like rings of honor for the team. Like you can stomach that by just playing in a nostalgia a little bit, and maybe you keep DeRozan and he sells tickets and scores points, and maybe like Drummond and Kobe White have a little like you keep them or something, and it stays fun. But you trade Caruso, you trade Levine, and you invest in Kobe White, you invest in Patrick Williams, who I think has improved this year as well, and that's enough. But I think to answer your question fully, I would rather do what you said than just be like we're to do the Wolf of Wall Street speech again and just hold still and say I'm not going anywhere. We're running the ship down into the ground. At least do something. At least trade. Like Levine was reported as being on the market like it feels like 9 months ago at this point. Just trade him for whatever the highest cost is you can. Just do it. You'll move on. You'll feel better from it.
Yeah, I think most reasonable people would agree with you that the most logical thing is to tear it down. And, I think you and I have talked about the Bulls trading their players almost once a week since we started this podcast. They are very frustrating, but I do think not trading DeMar would probably be the biggest mistake because he's the epitome of a floor raiser, which you don't need right now. And he could walk. So I just
the problem I think is who's trading for DeMar. Who's trading for DeMar?
Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe we can talk about that on Thursday if we do the trade asset ranking show because I don't know. I don't know which team in 2024 looks at DeMar DeRozan as the thing they added at the deadline. Especially because I thought the Knicks might be a team. Just more of the same for them, another high-usage, mid-range heavy guy, but now they got, somebody that fits a lot better there. So who knows? But, yeah, he would be the one I would push the hardest on. Can I just say
one other Bulls thing?
What other what?
Yeah, one other Bulls thing. Just one other Bulls thing. I want to just say very cool. He's not going to play this year, but it made me happy to see Lonzo Ball's apparently going to run and be able to run again in January. Made me a little. I don't know if he's ever coming back fully or if he can. Like, there's just a long way to go. But if that was a Bulls fan, that would give me a little bit of that would be a little spark a little joy in me.
Definitely.
It is January. It would make me happy just to.
Seems to be pain free doing that, and that's as good a sign as any. Like you said, though, he hasn't been able to run. Playing a basketball game is unfortunately still many, many checkpoints away. Let's close it out with the bottom. Literally, that's the name of the tier because they all suck. The addition to this group, though, is the Utah Jazz. They're the team I have trending down, and I think it's on purpose.
Yeah.
Their defense has just not been quite as good this year. They still are bringing Walker Kessler and Keontae George off the bench. I don't understand what some of these teams that are rebuilding do with their lineups sometimes. It doesn't make any sense, but whatever. They're clearly not trying to win. We'll talk about the market and stuff a ton between now and the middle of February, but I wanted to throw in actually on the Jazz real quick, and then we can skip the Pistons. I have them starred. I don't want to talk about Detroit. We talked about the Thunder trades. Olynyk is a great example of somebody that I think would check some boxes for them because I think he can fit into the way that they want to play offensively and be a role player, but he can push Nikola Jokic off of his spots in the post 3 times in a game, foul 3 times, make a 3 or 2, and no harm, no foul. Like, he's exactly what we're talking about, and I think the Jazz, as a seller, could provide another team with some nice stuff. But the team I wanted to focus in on, and I have the take here on our document already, and I don't know if it's hot or not, but I saw this team on Monday night in Phoenix. A horrible game. They don't play a fun style of basketball. Portland Trailblazers. I'm feeling a little bit optimistic about them the more that I watch them, and for some reason I've watched them a lot. They played the Suns 3 times this year, but they're also on late at night a lot, and I'll just turn it on while I'm in bed. The take/question that I have for you is, could we be past the laughing at Chauncey Billups phase and onto the he might be a good coach phase?
I think it's possible he's gotten better just because he's been coaching for as long as he has now.
That's all you got. That's the best you can say.
There's a story in the well, no. So I am still skeptical, and I don't think it was right for him, frankly, in his career. Even if I get why you take this job, and I get the impulse to hire him for the situation he was put into to coach Dame and all of that. Like, I don't think that was really good for him in terms of like figuring himself out. It's not even because it wasn't even like the Lakers where like, hey, you hired Darvin Ham and you figured stuff out, but you have LeBron, okay, or like you have Adrian Griffin up in Milwaukee, who I think is not quite as overwhelmed as maybe you would have thought a month ago. I think, and they just brought another assistant that he knew. So okay. The one thing that caught my eye like a month ago with Billups, there's a story in The Athletic by Jason Quick, who's covered that team for a long time. And he's been like really focusing on like connecting to that team. And there's some stuff in there about how he's leading that team and trying to instill something. And maybe this is like the right role for him, is just to be like the first coach and the starting coach for a team that is rebuilding, and he can like teach them how to be adults in the NBA. Like maybe that's like kind of the optimal role for what Chauncey's good at as a coach, and maybe that's what's shining through. That's kind of my thesis on him, is that maybe that like what he's good at is actually just shining through in this specific circumstances.
Well, I think that's valid, and I want to echo what you said about how he was brought in. Obviously, the controversy around it is not something we need to spend any time on now, but I think the very least they could have done with hiring him the way that they did and not hiring Becky Hammon and then floating a bunch of weird leaks about like talking to Don Staley and stuff was have more of a prepared answer for why they hired him and how they handled that process instead of sort of gaslighting us, I think, and pretending like it wasn't because of Dame and they did all their due diligence about the past issue when he was on the Celtics and all that stuff. So that didn't do them any favors. I'm not overlooking that and whatever, but I do think your point about personality-wise, you do need a different type of coach when you're restarting than you do later on. We'll see if he's a good coach to win a playoff series, but they're miles from that. And I think specifically the types of players that they've brought in, I know it's obvious, but the dude played the same position as the best players on the team, you know? So if you're building around Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and Shaedon Sharpe, Chauncey Billups is probably a guy who can relate to what they went through. Somebody who got traded on his rookie contract, took a while to fit and settle down into the league, and had to, I think, kind of grow into a winning role and a winning mentality in the NBA. But the other part of it to me is like what they're doing defensively. I know it's that they're only 20th in the NBA, but it's held steady at that number for a while. I don't think it's a fluke, and it's not exactly like their personnel is some sort of murderer's row of stoppers or that they got some kind of veteran center, you know, who's anchoring things. So I'm impressed by that, and I think that more than anything is kind of where I'm like selling myself on, okay, what if he gets better personnel, has those relationships with some of those young guards? In a year or two, we might be talking about, hey, like he turned this around and now they're a frisky, you know, play-in team.
I think too, like to your credit on the defense, like when I saw them in person, you could tell that they were drilled defensively. You could tell that they were prepared on that. And even if they couldn't always execute it at a high level and couldn't get the requisite amount of stops, and on the year they just haven't enough, there's something to the fact that like they at least had an identity defensively. There is something to that. It is more than some of the other teams in this bottom tier, Brendan, I think, can say. Like, I don't know. Like, what is Detroit's defensive identity right now? What is the Utah Jazz defensive identity right now? Like,
Portland had that funky zone last year. They were above 500 into almost midway through the season. And this year, like you said, they're executing on defense. They're getting good performances out of young role players, not just the best guys, but Thibault is having his most playable minutes, I think, as an NBA guy. Jabari Walker feels like he's a player. Tamani Kamara's a rookie who already looks like he could be something. Their backup center, Duop Reith, has been very, very solid. These are all names people probably do not know, but you will soon once this team starts to win. And I think the player development side of it, too, is a big testament to that coaching staff. So maybe I should have had them as the trending up. I just, they're not going to win this year. But the other stuff, how they're getting it done and progressing, I think is super solid. And, the rest of this year is probably about how those three guards do fit together and can they actually get on the court together, because none of them can seem to stay healthy, and that's been a big impediment as well.
I guess maybe it's a tease to Thursday, perhaps, or just thinking about trades. I could also see a world where maybe someone, I don't know what the right price would be, but I could see teams calling about it Anthony Simons.
You can't trade Anthony Simons.
I really could see that as like a thing. He's been too good, do you think? Been too interesting?
Yeah. I think he's untradeable. I think he's looked like an all-star.
I don't hate that take.
And I know it's a small sample, but the numbers would tell you the same thing. I mean, he's only played 11 games, but he's averaging 27 and 5, shooting 40% from 3 and 50% from 2. I'm not trading that guy.
He was in Michael Pina's column about players who've improved this season for Alec. He said the same thing you did. Basically, he wrote the same thing you did, basically, and I get that. I just think if I was other teams, I think I would try and then to be willing to get the phone hung up on me when they tell me no.
I mean, it's going to be awkward, right? Because he's 24, Shaedon is 20, and Scoot is 19. But I guess just we at least have to evolve it from he's not the guy where once you traded Dame for Hero, just dump Simons somewhere. Like, that's not what he is anymore. He is, you're either keeping him and trading the other guys to build around him, or if you're ever going to be trading him, it is for Joel Embiid level, like Luka gets upset type of thing. Like I think he's at that point now. He's already on his second contract, so he could be underpaid too if he keeps this up, which makes him even more valuable in kind of a trade sense. So yeah, I think they keep him for this year, see what he can be, see how he fits with those guys, and then honestly, I even think this summer is probably too soon to make a snap judgment on what that trio can be, because they can play together is the thing, right? Like, it's not perfect, but if you're not trying to win, who cares?
They should trade Jeremy Grant, though, I guess, I would say, if they can, but I just don't know who really would. I would be not in love with taking on the Jeremy Grant contract if I was another team.
Well, that might be a good place to wrap it, because we can definitely talk about Grant on Thursday. There was a show a while back where you asked me to convince you that he could have trade value, and I might be able to make the case 2 days from now.
Okay. I'm just gonna say, do you know how much he's making in the year 2027 and 28? That's all. If he opts in,
yeah, that's going to be a hot potato contract.
How much money that is?
There's no way around that part of it. But I think if a team is wanting to win in the short term, and he's the best they can do, I could see it happening.
Okay,
we'll hash it out.
I'm down to be convinced. Yeah, we'll get to it on Thursday. All right, let's wrap it up. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. This has been our tiers. This has been reacting to the Knicks and the Raptors guys making their debuts. Back later this week with more of the Just Basketball Show. Check out Thrive Fantasy. Check out Homage. Enjoy the hoops. Talk to you soon.